2024 is shaping up to be a very interesting year. And of course, a lot of prepared citizens out there are concerned about the concept of a possible false flag attack occurring here in the near future. So let's talk about what signs to watch out for regarding a false flag attack so you know what it is you might be witnessing when one occurs. Now, historically, the false flag concept was developed by pirates when they would raise a flag that showed being friendly to whatever ship they were targeting, and then as they allowed them to get closer, they might have realized they were pirates, but in many ways it might have been too late. So that's where the concept originally came from. And of course, there's historical evidence of false flags being used here in the modern era. We had the Gleiwitz incident of 1939, which actually justified the German invasion of Poland. And that was an entire scenario where German officers dressed up as Polish insurgents and attacked a radio station. Then we also have the Gulf of Tonkin events, which happened in 1964 and led to airstrikes on North Vietnamese targets being authorized due to the fact that some of our naval vessels were under attack. But of course, now we have a lot more information showing that maybe that wasn't necessarily the case. And of course, there are many other historical examples of false flag attacks occurring in order to move an agenda forward. And we have all this historical evidence, but even as of right now, the word false flag is still demonized in many ways. And the ADL even defines false flags as a term used by conspiracy theorists, even though it has actually happened multiple times throughout history. But here we are talking about it in 2023. And now, of course, in 2024, a big one I'd be watching out for would be the possibility of a cyber attack false flag. And that would basically include a threat actor taking steps to impersonate or use distinctive tactics of another threat actor to make it seem like someone else was responsible for a cyber attack. So all these possibilities are there. But what signs do we need to watch out for before one occurs so that we can be better informed about the situation that might be unfolding right in front of our eyes? Well, let's talk about that. But I do need to mention really quick that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel. And of course, they've been supporting me throughout the entire year of 2023. And I really appreciate them doing that. And this is actually one of the preparedness incentives I'm giving away on my Subscribe Star page for the month of December that was supported by Midway USA. So a big thanks to them for helping me out, as well as helping me out on Subscribestar. So what are the signs we need to watch out for? Okay, well, first and foremost, there's a little graphic that's been floating around the internet for quite some time. And it actually has some good ideas as to what you would want to watch out for, but there are some things that have changed that I don't agree with on it anymore. So we'll just reference that as we go through here, but these are things that I'd be watching out for if I were you in case a false flag attack were to happen in your area, or even just to us as a country in general. The first thing you'd watch out for is immediate identical media coverage of the attack. And what does that mean? Well, if every single news outlet and every single station is parroting each other about exactly what's happening, and they seem to have more details than they usually would in the immediacy of an attack, that's something that would be at least like a red flag. You'd want to watch out for that and say, hey, like, why do they all have the same exact information and why is it all being said in the exact same way? Something to keep in mind. Now, the next thing would be that the attack itself would coincide with some sort of current political agenda, which I think is pretty obvious what we'd be looking at here in 2024. But obviously, if it would push a narrative towards a goal in the sense of whatever agenda there might be, that's something you would want to definitely take a look at based on the fact that there's more to the story than just an attack. There's a benefit to the attack, and anytime there's a benefit, you have to ask who may have created the scenario in order to benefit from it, right? There's also the fact that a false flag attack usually will inspire visceral emotional reactions. And that's because it's the most useful form of a false flag, is when everybody gets so emotional about the attack that they're witnessing that they act irrationally thereafter. And they go along with decisions that might not make sense, but in the time frame of them being emotional, it doesn't matter. They just want something to be done, right? We've seen this happen many times throughout our modern history now, haven't we? So that's definitely something you'd want to watch out for. Now, one of the things I don't necessarily agree with this little graphic that's been floating around the internet for a long time now is that all the initial reports will contradict the official story in the end, and that the initial reports will have conflicting evidence and everything else, right? And that's usually true, but honestly, I don't know if I can hold on to that one in the sense of it showing that a false flag is occurring, because the media is now programmed to try to be first to the story, and they get things wrong all of the time. Even in some of the most basic circumstances, they get the information wrong on the initial reports because they're just trying to beat the other news outlets to the punch in order to get the most views and clicks on their story. So I don't know if that one counts anymore, because that's every single news story ever now, right? So we can't really use that to weigh whether or not something's a false flag, but that is a consideration to keep in mind. Now, another thing that I thought this graphic has wrong now, based on our modern scenario, is that it says that they wouldn't necessarily show the victims to the public. They word it differently, but we want to be able to talk about this freely, right? So they won't show the victims is what they used to say, but I think we all know now, here in 2023 or at the end of it and into 2024, that they're definitely capable of showing victims of false flag attacks throughout social media, right? I think we know that based on the fact that even if attacks aren't false flags, we're seeing what's happening to the victims of these attacks now because of the widespread use of social media. So that won't be an indicator, at least in my mind, because nowadays I don't think they're afraid to show people evidence of these attacks, and I don't think they're afraid to go to those lengths in order to pull off these attacks. So I don't know if that one counts anymore. But let me know in the comments what you think about that. But that's just my perception as to where we are right now in this modern era. So another thing you would watch out for is that there are drills happening in the vicinity of a similar nature, which we have seen strangely throughout modern history here, where there would be a training drill with police or military, and then something would happen in that same general area that would be the exact thing they were training for or drilling for. So that's something you would always just want to watch out for, and it's why we talk about some of the drills that are happening around the world, because at times it seems like they have everybody in place and in position in order for said false flag attack to occur. That's just something to keep in mind. It's why we monitor those things. It's because we just want to see if something was to occur because of a drill or because it exists, or if that coincidence is just that, a coincidence, right? Another thing that would be a sign of a false flag would be like manipulation provided by the media. What would that mean now, here going into 2024? Well, to me, that would mean manipulating the content, manipulating the footage, creating AI-generated content in order to drive home the narrative of the false flag attack. And now with AI as part of the equation, it's very easy to make somebody think they're watching something in real time that might not even be real. It might not even exist. So it wouldn't be that hard for a government or some kind of a organization of malicious nature wanting to create chaos or disruption to create some kind of AI-generated campaign to be used against the people to show them something's happening when it's clearly not. Like, this is something we're dangerously stepping forward into now at this point in time. With AI-generated images, AI-generated everything, we are definitely at the whim of those who will tell us whether or not it's AI, and then we have to be able to trust those people to be telling us the truth, right? So that's something I think is a big one. And it's kind of, I would say, a good idea, or at least a skill you might want to learn or focus on, at least at this point in time, to try to verify or realize whether or not something is generated by AI. There's a lot of little indicators or tidbits that could tell you if something was AI generated versus something being organic. For example, on an AI generated image, generally they get the hands wrong, and there's going to be like 17 fingers and 3 of them will be backwards. So these are things that you might want to look into now in order to try to decipher some of these new imagery generating devices that are out there that might be throwing false flag attacks at you in the sense of a narrative via AI generation. So keep that in mind, but I definitely think that's a big one that we're definitely walking into, okay? And then we also have the federal government being involved as another indicator of a false flag attack. So what does that mean? Well, it either involves the federal government directly. So it's something that's happening to, like, for example, the FBI, or something that's happening to politicians or something along those lines, or the federal government gets involved in something that usually they might not be involved in. So if something's generally handled by the state in the sense of law enforcement, in the sense of a response by law enforcement, and the FBI and the ATF and all these federal organizations suddenly show up, it could give you some reasons to ask more questions as to say, why is this happening? Why are you guys all here? Why is the federal government here? We're talking about just a lowly criminal. Why is this lowly criminal suddenly getting the attention of the entire federal government, right? Those are considerations you want to make too when you're trying to figure out or decipher whether or not something's a false flag attack. Now, Also, I just want to say, let me know in the comments below if you would add things to this list, or if you would, give some other ideas to the community here as to what they should expect if they were trying to decipher whether or not something was a false flag. I think that there's a lot of good information in this community, and many of you might be able to articulate this better than even I can. But I'm just trying to give you some things to consider as we move forward into a very tumultuous time, especially considering it's an election year, right? Now, one thing to keep in mind is that false flags don't have to be successful to be beneficial, right? And what do I mean by that? Well, they can still have value even if they fail. And so the failure of a false flag can provide just as much value as the success of one. So don't think that just because one was failed or one was foiled or something didn't go right during the attempt of a false flag, that it didn't get the job done in the first place, right? We all know now that, for example, the Gleiwitz incident of 1939 that justified the German invasion of Poland was a false flag. Like, we know it was. Even back then, a lot of people knew it was. But it didn't stop Germany from being able to invade Poland, at least, I mean, for their own reasons, right? But that's what I'm trying to tell you. Like, even the Gulf of Tonkin incident didn't stop us from getting more involved in Vietnam. Now, did it, right? Just because it turned out to be a false flag, mission was still accomplished. So keep all this in mind as we move into 2024. I'm just trying to give you things to consider and to think about, and deciphering some of the information that's coming at us when it comes to us during a time of war, which is what our planet is currently experiencing. Being able to decipher that information could be the difference of being able to plan accordingly for whatever the reaction or whatever the consequences of that information would be. And this is what I try to do here, give you things to think about. Let me know in the comments below what else you think I should have added to that list, or what other signs you'd be looking for, or what other threats you're concerned about moving into 2024. If you want anything else from me, go to magicprepper.com. And besides that, it's going to be it for Magic Prepper.